Welcome to the Samson Strength Coach Collective. On today's episode, we have Christina Bernal, Assistant Strength and Conditioning Coach at UPenn, also known as Penn. Obviously, I've got a love for Penn, my first ever internship, so it's fantastic to speak with somebody who's operating a high-level program there. And then, we cover a bunch of different topics, things like her clinic that they just put on this past weekend, and a bunch of other really cool things. One of my favorite pieces about this podcast is she talks about relationship development and relationship development with everybody. And I think when we were recording the episode, it's very clear that she's a second Y type of person or a second level type of person. So it's not just enough to take things to one level. You have to take it even further, which is exactly the type of people we like to talk to on the podcast. So I'm very excited to dive into everything. As always, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. What's going on, Samson Strength Coach Collective listeners? On today's episode, we have Christina Bernal, Assistant Strength and Conditioning Coach, and recently Internship Coordinator. Congratulations on the addition of Internship
Director.
Come Director, on, my goodness. All right. Well, There we go. Right? Look at that. And I asked you right before this, so that shows my retention skills are not very good. Well, Internship Director.
You're all good.
Well, thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to get into it. Currently working at UPenn. I loved UPenn. I went to school at Temple, and then went over to UPenn for my first ever internship. That's the place I always talk about, hearing the chains, because I don't know if you guys still use chains there. It was probably as loud as possible in that weight room. This is that one straight alleyway.
Yeah. The acoustics in that place really elevate the chain.
Oh, they certainly
the chain
do.
Noises.
Yep. I remember I was like, all right, if I actually like this piece, then I probably should be a strength coach, because I imagine this would probably bother a lot of different people. So that was a good introduction for me. Well, again, thank you for coming on. I'm excited to kind of just dive right into it. Can you just give us your background in strength and conditioning, and then what's brought you to UPenn?
Yeah, absolutely. So I attended the University of Maryland for undergrad. I was a javelin thrower there. And if you're a thrower, it's like an everyday process. I was a walk-on on Maryland's team. And from there, I really loved how hard they made you work. It made me want to work harder. And I had a great coach and some great teammates that pushed me along. One of my favorite parts of training was the weight room. So I had originally gone in for psychology, which was like a limited enrollment program. So I had done testing and all this stuff to get into that program. And when I called my parents up and I was like, I think I want to change my major, my mom was like, are you actually joking? And that came with a really pivotal time in my undergrad career. I had broken my leg in several places. I kind of tore up everything in my knee, throwing javelin at the ACC championship in 2014 at Chapel Hill. I haven't been back to Chapel Hill since, because I'm not doing it.
I don't blame you.
But yeah, that proved to be, my strength coach was there next to me through the entire process of I had to get gaitored off the field. I had to go into a doctor's office. I didn't know any of the trainers there. My trainer was not at the meet at the time because we threw early in the morning. A lot of the track events didn't start until later. So I'm sure she might have been running treatment or something in the morning at the hotel. The Georgia Tech trainer in 2014 actually was the first one to get to me, and my leg was facing the wrong way. So I'm like, all right, I had nobody there because the other girl that threw javelin with me was a multi, and she was still competing. So I got gaitored off by myself. My strength coach followed after me. And I was like, you know what? I feel like I could, that really touched me in a way that I feel like I could do that for other people. And after effects of the physical were, the psychological effect of I'm not with my team anymore. I can't even train with my team. But my strength coach always said, hey, come in and do upper body. Come in and do something. Stay around the team as much as you can. And he was awesome. And that was something that really drew me to wanting to be a strength coach. So a lot of the soft skill stuff I felt like he was really good at. And then one of my mentors, Seth Diders, he's at Virginia Tech right now. He kind of picked it up and said, hey, intern with us. There is a student athlete program. and it was awesome. I learned from him, and at the time was Christy Polner, now Christy Dieters. They were my two mentors in this, and I would say they weren't like hard on me in a way that I didn't deserve or that nobody deserves. It's just maybe they saw a potential in me, but it was like, you have to stand up straighter. You need to do this. You need to do that. And I was like, all right, cool. So I gravitate towards people who are a little bit harder on me. From there, I knew I wanted to be a strength coach. I ended up going and working full time with my strength coach from Maryland that ended up leaving and going to a private facility in Fairfax, or no, it was in Ashburn, Virginia. I was living in Fairfax, Virginia. I left full time to go back and get my master's degree. Made a stop at App State. Thought I was going to get my master's degree there. Didn't work out. And then Coach Seth Dieters was at Florida State at the time with their baseball team. Reached out to me and was like, "Hey, are you still looking to get your master's?" And I was like, "You couldn't have called at a better time," because at the time they had basically just dropped the funding for the program, and it was like days before Christmas. And he was like, "Let's just get on a call with our director and see how it goes." And Coach Elisa Angeles, who's at Florida State now still, ended up taking a chance on me. I went there. I got my grad degree, doing a graduate assistantship. I was with track and field, cheerleading and dance. And people are always like, those are so opposite. Like the only more opposite you could get is like doing football, cheerleading, and dance. But listen, the Florida State Golden Girls and the Florida State cheerleading teams are hard workers. They probably do more than I've seen some programs do, and they're not considered a varsity sport there. But they put in the hours day in and day out, and I still have so much respect for them. And they really helped me build my coaching philosophy and my training philosophy. And I graduated from Florida State in 2020. There were no jobs open in 2020. So a lot of people were getting furloughed, a lot of people getting laid off, a lot of people leaving the field. It was scary. I ended up moving home, working at Elite Sports Physical Therapy and Reach Your Potential Training, which was the first internship I had out of grad school, or not out of grad school, out of undergrad. And that was really what made me think, like, I really love working with college. I worked with college athletes in that private facility. I loved working with college athletes, and that's where I wanted to go from there. So I interned under Coach Adam Fight and Coach Bobby Smith back in 2016, and then went back to work for Sharon Wentworth, who's married to Bobby Smith. They have an awesome program going there where they have a really progressive physical therapy spot and a private facility, strength and conditioning place where it's like the mecca of New Jersey high school facilities. Like all of the best high school athletes that come out of Jersey probably went to RIP. So I was working there for a little while, following the COVID guidelines, and ended up moving out to Texas State, working with Just Track and Field. I helped out with golf and tennis. Wasn't really for me. Ended up moving back to Jersey, going to Monmouth, working with their football team. Absolutely changed my life. I thought I was going to leave being a strength coach in Texas, and I was like, I'm going to do anything else because I loved strength and conditioning. I just didn't feel like the field really loved me back, and maybe there was a sign. Maybe I had to leave. But going to Monmouth, and Coach Tim Ream gave me a chance. I was a part-time there, and he even told me, like, you're a little overqualified for the position. I said, I'll do whatever you need me to do. Like, I will make this position what you need it to be. And then Coach Gio Grassi, Coach Mike Piers, and Coach Bree Rubino, they all really took me under their wing and like made me love coaching again. And then I took the job over here at Penn, needed a full-time job, needed benefits. And I've been here for about 2 years.
Wow. Seriously, what an amazing journey. I really, I'm impressed, one, at your ability to push through this adversity that you faced, right?
Yeah.
Let alone, I was a thrower myself. I think the worst injury I ever got in the circle was like I rolled my ankle. That was it. And so
yeah.
I think it's a different, but I've seen to me, it's so weird. It's either overuse injuries or something like catastrophic happens, so,
yep.
One, to face that, but then one thing that you said really stuck out to me is that you loved strength and conditioning, but the field didn't really love you back. what was
Mhm.
your motivation? Like what made you decide, let me just go to Monmouth and just try one more time to see if I can continue in this field?
Yeah. So I'll reach out to Seth and Christy, and they'll just like give it to me straight. Like, hey, am I being a little bee about this? Like, is this really happening? Hey, is this situation as bad as it sounds? And sometimes they'll say, yeah, just get out of there. Just go somewhere else. And for me, that go somewhere else mentality, I'm very lucky because I feel like I have the support system that said, wherever you go, I will support you, instead of, why would you do that? That's really far away from family. You don't know anybody out there, this and that. I have really supportive parents. I have really supportive mentors. Um, and to be honest, every single time that I was like, I don't know where I'm going to go next, I always had a job with Bobby Smith and Sharon Wentworth. So I give them a lot of credit for always kind of taking me back during my in betweens.
I mean, those mentors are just so crucial, right? Especially I
Absolutely.
feel like in your younger years, it's really, there's a lot of stuff that you just don't know. It's like almost like you just go out on your own, and it's like, you have to just figure out a lot and then understand exactly like you said. Am I being a little bee about this, right? Or is there something I can do to kind of change my situation? I'll never forget the phone call
Yeah.
I had with my mentor, and he was like, "Dude, you're being a little bee. You're actually being a big bee right now. So figure it out,
Yeah.
right?" And I mean, that changed the next year of where I was at. It completely
Yeah.
changed it because it reframed it, and instead of me just saying over and over again, like, "Man, I hate this situation," or "This is messed up," or "This is unfair to me," it was all of a sudden, okay, well, what can I do to control this situation, right? And having those
Absolutely.
mentors allowed me. And then I'm so curious about it, right, too, because that was something I was considering. I think every strength coach goes to that portion of
Oh
their
yeah.
career, and they go through it multiple times, and like, man, do I really want to continue to do this specifically? And then I remember I had the exact same talk with a mentor, and he was like, "Dude, just try out another spot, get
Yeah.
get a little bit closer to family, try it out." And it made the world
Absolutely.
of difference. It made me, in a much better situation now that I love.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I 100% agree. Sometimes you just need that, like, you need somebody to, it sucks to say, but like sometimes you need the validation of like, you either own that you're, you know, being sensitive, or you own that, okay, this isn't the place for me. Time to back up and go if I really love this.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, and you've obviously moved around a lot, but I'm glad you found the situation that makes it all work for you now. I mean, that makes
Yeah,
just the world of
absolutely.
difference. Is that
Mhm.
having those mentors and people to rely on, is that what drove you to be interested in becoming the internship director, not coordinator?
Yeah, yeah, honestly, I think I've had so many great internship experiences, and like I said, I gravitate towards people who push me in certain ways. So, um, I mean, Coach Adam Fight, Coach Bobby Smith, Coach Pat Livesey, Coach Jake Rook, like all of all of them, Coach Seth Diders, Coach Christy Diders, they've always kind of seen something and maybe that I hadn't seen before. Um, and they said, listen, you either get with it or you get over it. And I chose to get with it. And I know that I could shoot them a text at any point and be like, hey, like, why did I start this again? And they would be able to answer that for me. And um, I would say taking those experiences. I've also had not great experiences. I've had days where I'm like, man, I just wasn't with it. And what I was asked to do, I think wasn't right or something like that. And I say, hey, all right, I learned what I don't want to do as an internship director. And so now when I hire interns, so I've hired for both strength and conditioning and sports nutrition. I just make sure I let them know, hey, listen, like if you figure out when you're here that you actually hate strength and conditioning, and this is where you figure out where you don't want to do it, tell me so I can point you in the right direction. Like I have a really, really, really great network. I'm the type of person that's like, when you hire me, I'm going to say hi to everybody in the building. I'm going to get to know them just a little bit so that, you know, when we're all kind of pushing through on the days where, you know, for example, in Philly, it's like 10 degrees and I have to bus into work because I can't drive there. And, it takes me 45 minutes when I can be there in 10 if I drove, and it's 6 o'clock in the morning. And I see, the lady that helps clean our floors. I'm like, hey, Say, how are you? Another day at the office, another day in paradise, right? But we can have like those little moments. Um, Another day, if somebody comes in. and they figure out, man, I actually really love facilities and operations. I can point them their direction. Right. So that's what makes it important, is knowing that you're going to get people that aren't going to be strength coaches, but they still deserve a decent human being to point them in the right direction.
That's really interesting. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody actually talk about that follow-up piece for somebody who's not interested in strength and conditioning. And myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I mean, I always take on one intern every semester. And, if that person ends up not loving strength and conditioning, I'm just kind of like, all right, then it's not for you, right? That's a really
Yeah. Right.
interesting piece. I've never heard of people making that actual connection for those people to get them into those other fields.
Yeah. If I can, I will, for sure.
That's awesome. Well, I think that shows, exactly that you do care about their development overall. And it's a
Another
better
day.
situation too, right? Because then you're just trying to force a square peg into a round hole, and nobody
Right.
wants to be there. And you can't be how you want to be as an internship coordinator with them as well. That was another thing I was curious
Absolutely.
about, like, because of your style of how you were coached first coming into the field, where you talked about, okay, stand up straight. All these small little things
Mm-hmm.
matter, and obviously that's what kind of inspired you to stay in strength and conditioning. I was coached the same way. Do you feel like you are able to, or do you still kind of keep that style for your interns who find out they really are interested in training and conditioning and that's what they want to do?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I actually just had this conversation at the clinic that we held on Friday, because I did an internship advisors roundtable. It was open to everybody. So one of my former interns, actually two of my former interns, came by to kind of. I told them, hey, be honest. You can tell them exactly what you didn't like about this experience. Um, but I do find it a little bit harder another day that the coaches get, because it's just a different time. And I know I sound probably like the people that I made fun of when I was like 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, getting into like figuring this out. But another day is just like a different form of communication. So what I really all encompassing, what I really bring it back to is professionalism. So making sure, like, hey, like, I want you to look like you want to be here. I want you to dress like you want to be here. And I want you to be like locked in. So if you want to go home and you want to scroll through TikTok and you want to dissociate, because I do the same thing sometimes, save that for when you leave here, or save that for when you get home. Like, I want you to be here and locked in. Do we need coffee in the morning? I'll bring coffee. Do we need energy drinks in the morning? I'll bring those too. But like, I need your full attention for this amount of hours. And a lot of the time when they know what to expect in the future, even if it's the near future, hey, for the next 4 hours, we're going to be coaching and doing internship curriculum and all that kind of stuff, then they're willing to say, okay, if I get through an hour of this, I only have 3 hours left. If I get through 2 hours, I only have 2 hours left. If that's how they have to get through it, because that's how I get through some things sometimes, then that's how they get through it. But a lot of the time they end up at least learning something in the end that they can bring into any profession. I find the weight room to be just as much of a classroom as any classroom at a university would be. You learn discipline, you learn respect, you learn time management, you learn integrity, all that kind of stuff, just in a different way than somebody lecturing you in the classroom.
And it's an interesting piece too, because coaches always say this, and I think sometimes they hype it up a little bit too much, right? Just to be like, well, you're a college athlete. Everybody's going to want to hire you just because you were a college athlete. Now, there certainly
Right.
is more of a bias towards hiring those people in those specific populations. What I think is so interesting about the weight room is you get the discipline aspect, like you just spoke about, and then you don't even get to play the games, right? So you get all the discipline piece of it. And those are skills that you can continue on and use. And you don't even really get to do the fun stuff besides lift in the weight room, right? But ultimately, there is something you can take to whatever position or whatever job you have in the future. And it makes a difference. I don't know. I'm a big proponent of the coaching hard aspect, and ultimately, I don't know. I think I've really had to find a balance for myself, right? Because I think everything in life is a homeostatic curve, right? I've been too nice. I've been way too mean. I've been too nice. And then it kind of balances out to the middle. But ultimately what I found is the people who I know are going to be strength coaches, and I guess it's tough to, and you don't want to label somebody and say, well, you're not going to be a strength coach, but sometimes you just kind of know. And like the people who have it, whatever that it would be, I coach them the hardest, right? And we have the toughest conversations over and over again versus the ones who, like you talk about, kind of like TikTok and like scrolling on it, I'm like, all right, just don't have your phone on the floor, dude. And then you can ask me any questions after the lift and then I'll see you later. But then the ones who I know have it and who I want to continue to work with and I think would be really good coaches, those are the ones who I'm like, okay, what exactly did we do? Why did we do this? And really dive into those questions instead of just kind of letting them say, hey, I'll see you tomorrow.
Right. Absolutely. Because you're going to invest in the people that invest in you. And that's like a lifelong thing. It's not just with my interns, but it's with my friends, my family, the colleagues that I work with in this field. I mean, if an intern comes to me and says, I really, really want this, I said, okay, if you really, really want this, I'm going to really, really, hammer down into you sometimes.
Yep. And it makes a difference, right? Because then they're going to be prepared
Yeah.
for the rest of their life, and no matter if they continue, like you say, in strength and conditioning or not, they're going to be prepared for those. And they're going to have the skills to kind of just handle hard, because I think it's a pretty tough internship to go through,
Mhm.
regardless of wherever you're at. It always sucks. There's always athletes lifted at 6 a.m. You talk about
Yep.
10 degrees in Philly. I remember riding my bike, in the 10 degrees. And I was like, this is
Yep.
awful. Like, I can't. But
Awful.
then for some reason, I just kept coming back because I just liked it. There was something that I liked enough
Yeah.
about it that I wanted to keep doing it. How did your clinic go this weekend? I'm very curious about that. And, like you said, it's your first one. So how was the
Yeah.
experience?
It was honestly an awesome experience. I think that we had, not to say low expectations, like we didn't have that much and we, just weren't thinking that we were going to do much. It's just like we let go of the expectations of, this isn't going to be like an NSCA conference. This isn't going to be like a state clinic that brings in hundreds of people the first time. Right. So we reached out mostly to our local strength coaches. So around here, it's Drexel, Temple, St. Joe's, Thomas Jefferson, Villanova, Widener, Westchester, kind of all of those universities, and said, hey, like, we're putting this on and we really want to, I guess before the pandemic, there was like a big five strength coaches like meetup every once in a while that I didn't know about, obviously, because I wasn't, around here at that time. But it was kind of like a reincarnation of that, plus some. So we had, I want to say like six, 7 or 8 speakers. I kind of emceed a little bit. So I introduced each of the speakers. I got a couple of vendors from the local area to come out and kind of get people to support small business. And then we had Perch, Team Builder, Sornex, Energy Wellness, Perform Better. They all sponsored the event. And so we got a good amount of people. I would say in total, with including us, was like 50 or 60 people. And it was really great. And then we had barbecue and beers afterwards. That's where the real networking happens. And it was really, really nice to get everybody together and, get people from different walks of life, because Penn, even being an Ivy League, is way different than Temple. It's way different than Drexel, who doesn't have football and they're more of just an engineering school. You get a lot of different people that do the same thing many different ways, which is like any strength coach conference. So it was really nice to have everybody.
I mean, that's always a really fun experience to be able to get people together, right? And I think it's always kind of sad when I hear about stuff kind of falling off because of COVID or whatever. I think Sam Whitney,
Right.
actually, who was a former guest on the podcast,
Oh,
was the
really?
one who organized those setups before. Yeah, he was at
Right.
Temple at the time, right? But some of those things have just been knocked down, whether people change positions or whatnot. I think
Right.
that's something we're trying to do within the Sun Belt as well too, because the biggest thing I've seen from the networking piece is how much you can advocate for what you want at your school, right? And
Right.
understand. And so, like, we wanted another strength and conditioning position. I looked around and found out that at App State, we were like the lowest in the teams to full-time coach ratio, and so then I
Mhm.
had to actually network and email everybody, which is a pain in the butt, right?
We
But
just did that
ultimately,
same process.
did you? There you go, right? But then you can actually take that to your AD and say, hey, this is a problem, right? This is something that
Yeah.
if we're going to say we want to be top of the conference, we're dead last. We're 14th out of 14 right now. So
Yeah.
what are we going to do to change this? And I love the networking aspect of it, but I think just the clinic part is really cool too. And especially if it's something that you want to continue to do year in and year out. What were some challenges that you didn't really expect facing when you were kind of setting this clinic
Um,
up?
I mean, budget is always it, because we want to provide the biggest and the best. Obviously, if you're hosting, you're kind of like, all right, well, I'm going to go all in and all out. Um, so like budgeting, wanting to provide like a huge breakfast or a huge lunch, or all these opportunities. Um, I would say any other like challenges. I guess working on like a larger scale with, it's a real big collaborative process. So we need facilities and operations to be on board with us. We need our strength staff to, everybody kind of putting in the work. And we had a strength coach leave in the process, like 6 weeks before this all went down. And she was a huge part of it. And she had the most experience probably putting all this together, and she's awesome. And I love her. I love that she moved on to something that she felt made her happier. But like picking up that was like, all right, like now I have to learn. Now I have to Google a bunch of stuff and figure it out. That might've been a challenge, but it wasn't one that was like absolutely unbearable. I can't think of one that really was like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this. Marketing it out to people, trying to get more people to come. A lot of people register last minute. So obviously it makes you very nervous when you're a month out and you're like, wow, this number is not really where I want it to be.
That's my concern, right? Because I want to do something like that at App State, and that's why I'm so curious about this process, right? Selfishly,
you guys have a good space for it, I would say.
We got a great space for it. So now, but here's my concern: we're up on the mountain, right? And so we, ultimately, can we get people to drive in from 2 hours out? I don't know. I hope so. I think you're a better networker than me, but hopefully we can get some people up here, because that's all I can think about is like, that's my, not stopping me from doing it, but my big fear is just like an image of me standing in this weight room with like 3 people and just being like, well, what do you guys want to talk about? Because, I've got stuff planned, but ultimately there's only 3 of you, so we can figure it out.
Boone is a special place. I drove down the mountain in it was 1 degree when I moved out of Boone.
Wow.
And I was moving from Boone to Tallahassee. It was 1 degree. And for whatever reason, my Ford Fusion was like, hey, we're going to, like, half the battery's going to work. You can't roll down your windows and you can't put your heat on. And we're not going to tell you how cold it is outside. You can start your car and your headlights will work. And I'm like, and that's when it snowed a whole bunch. And I was like, I just need to make it down the mountain. That's it. And then once I get down the mountain, I don't care where I have to stop. I'll stop. But I'm not stopping on this.
No, certainly not. And there's only a few spots out. Like I remember there was like a landslide one day on 421, and then there was like another like construction event where they like blew up a bridge, and so I was like, all right, there's like one road actually to still get out of Boone, and if this one goes down, then I'm horrified because I don't know how we're going to be able to logistically move out of this process. But
I think I used to have to hook down. Yeah, I used to have to hook down into Tennessee to get up to Boone. And I don't know if that's the only way. That was the way that I had to go. I was like, wow. Yeah.
I drove a 26-foot U-Haul up by Watauga Lake on that. That was not a super fun experience. It was, ultimately, that's when I drove it from Lubbock, Texas. And so that was like my second day of driving. At that point, I was just phased out and just ready to get it done with. So I think that piece actually helped me out a little bit.
Good on you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. So, you spoke about something at the very beginning of the podcast I think is a really interesting piece about what motivated you to be a strength coach. Your strength and conditioning coach is the only one there for you when this actual injury occurred. Do you feel like that kind of bonded you guys as you went forward, and especially in the rehab process, like you talk about pulling you in to do extra work or making sure that you're doing upper body and staying, actually within the team and being a part of the team? Do you think that kind of created a further bond for you?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I think I battled a couple injuries even before I broke my leg, and I rolled my ankle as well at practice one day, and it put me in a boot. And Seth Thider still calls me Boots to this day, but he shared an office with Brent Kwiatkowski, who was he was the strength coach at Maryland at the time. And I'm not sure, truthfully, I'm not sure what I would have done even for the rest of the time. Like, I competed on like the first or second day of the championship. And, I had to bus back with the team. My 20th birthday was the day before. Easter was that weekend. And I was like, dang, I can't find anything to be happy about. But he just like kind of carted me around and walked with me, talked with me, kind of like just cracked jokes with me and just like treated me normal instead of constantly being like, I'm really sorry. I feel sorry for you. which is like what a lot of my teammates did, which I didn't expect them to not do. But at the same time, like he kept on checking in with me. I kept on coming in to like, see him sit in his office, cry about the prognosis, like all this stuff. I couldn't get surgery for another 6 weeks after breaking my leg because I broke a bone. And so a lot of it was just simply being there. And I feel like that's really the unspoken job of strength and conditioning coaches, because you see some people at their very worst. Your job is to break them down physically. You're literally helping them tear muscle tissue so they could build back stronger, right? And sometimes you're seeing people at their very worst. And hot take, but I feel like that's a big part of what contributes to the burnout of strength coaches, because you take on so much emotional and mental turmoil that people are sharing with you that people don't realize how much that adds up. And as much as I love doing that, sometimes like administration's never going to understand that. They're never going to understand how much we actually are there for them. They only see the hour that they're working out in the weight room. They don't see when we go out to practice and we travel places and, people are sharing with us, hey, I don't know what I'm going to do after college. But that really, that bonded me and my strength coach pretty tightly. And I'm thankful for that.
That emotional burden piece is a really interesting aspect, because I think it's something that is kind of acknowledged or it's understood among strength coaches, but it's not really discussed to a large extent, right? And I think the most I got hit with this year was ultimately it was the transfer portal, right? So we had, I think we ended up with 15 guys, right? And we had 11 leave. And so I think the piece that kind of smacked me in the mouth and that just made me a little bit, bummed for the rest of the offseason was there were specific guys who, like you talked about, we broke them down and I watched them get, one guy was here for 2 years and watched him transform from a freshman where, he's doing a side plank for 10 seconds and is, completely shaking and like almost crying. Right. And then to develop and grow stronger, like that part was so cool. And then I kind of just built this like picture perfect junior, sophomore to junior off season, what it was going to look like. And then all of a sudden he comes into my office and he's like, hey, dude, I'm going to transfer out, right. And it was understandable. I think everybody's got to go for a situation that's right for them. But that was like the most emotional toll. And I think that's something that snuck up on me. Like I didn't really expect that to really weigh down on me. But, when you talk about burnout, like this season was really tough for me at the end of it because I felt like I didn't get to have the, April, May training of like, let's just get back in the weight room. Let's get reintroduced to it. It just felt much more like, all right, well, we've got 3 guys, and it was a bummer to see a lot of them leave. So I felt like that was a tough aspect, but then there's a million other emotional roller coasters that you kind of go on with each of your athletes too. And then, and then they just got to go and leave for a better situation for themselves. So it can really suck. And I think it can really weigh down on you. What are some ways that you kind of try to mitigate that stress for yourself?
Yeah. To be honest, and I'm like not secretive about it at all, is I go to therapy every week. I encourage everybody to at least try therapy and be able to have a place where you can unload something on somebody whose job it is. Because when you unload that kind of stuff on some people, sometimes they're not expecting it. Just like if I got up at 4:30 in the morning to get to work at 6 or 6:30, and I've gone all day and I don't have track and field until 6:30 at night, it's 7:15, 7:30, and one of my track athletes comes to me and kind of starts unloading. I'm kind of like, I can't even see straight right now, right? I've been working all day. I got up really early. I have to do it all again tomorrow. But I don't want them to see that, right? So I need to be able to pull it together and be able to distinguish, what's something I feel like I can help them in control right now, and what's something I feel like, hey, you got to take a deep breath and leave that at the door and be able to go home, eat dinner, go to bed, and not think about it. I think I've been able to be a lot more open and honest with conversation with administration. So actually the whole process that we had in being like, hey, I think we want to get maybe a couple more coaches and use the internship, blueprint to kind of maybe make a part-time position or something like that. It got me a lot closer with some of our administration to be able to talk openly about that kind of stuff, because sometimes I feel like administrators, and I've gotten this comment before, like, you're only ever going to be a strength coach. Like, we don't need your help up here. But being able to go to the administrators and have them listen to me and talk to me about certain things, and being able to tell them, hey, this is what the student athlete experience is right now. I'm listening to these kids so that they don't go home and have to keep it in at night because they don't feel like they can talk to their teammates. And with that, there's open more conversation of maybe we need better mental health services for these kids. Maybe we need to fix the quality of the dining hall situation because they're having food insecurity. And that's something that, like, nobody would look at an Ivy League kid and be like, yeah, there's no way they can afford to eat. But there are plenty of them that they don't have time in the day to eat. They don't have, the resources that people stereotypically think that an Ivy League kid would have. Right. So being a lot more open and honest with the conversations with admin has helped a lot because it makes me feel like I can go home at night and feel like, all right, I'm elevating it to the right people that can do something about it, because I can't go and say, hey, we need another mental health, counselor on staff. Like, that's not something I have the authority to do.
And you have to think about the academic stress of an Ivy League school as well. Right.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
I got to imagine
That's for sure.
I was just an intern there. Right. So I didn't really develop these super deep relationships. It was more kind of like, oh, you guys went to a party this weekend. That's cool. Right. But, ultimately you get to know them a lot more. I'm sure the academic stress piece is a much, much higher component at the Ivy League school. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes. As much as they compete on the field, on the court, on the track, all that kind of stuff, they're competing in the classroom for an internship after college for, whatever major they're in. They have to compete for internships to get those jobs. I think coming out with an Ivy League degree is not the end all be all. Like, they have to make those relationships with the alumni who are then going to hire them later, that kind of stuff. So it's a lot for them to handle. It's a lot of human interaction. And I feel like this generation had a big growth limitation, I would say, with the pandemic, where there wasn't a lot of speaking back and forth with people. And now you have to make a good impression, right? So it's tough, I would say, especially for this generation coming in right now.
Yeah, well, I think it also kind of takes away a crutch from the coach, right? Where if I talk to any of my men's basketball team, all of them want to go pro, right? All of them want to go NBA,
Yeah,
and then if
absolutely.
it's not the NBA, then it's going to be, multiple ranks underneath. They're fine with playing in Germany, or any of these places overseas, right? Whereas you speak with Ivy League athletes, I feel like it's much less of a focus on going pro. It may be more of, okay, well, this is a fantastic opportunity I have here. And like you said, the skills from this sport can help me in my future career. When it gets tough, there's times where I can just be like, hey, man, like, remember exactly what you wanted out of this. Like, you told me you wanted to be a pro. You're not matching what you said with your actions right now.
Yes.
And then that's my number one card. I can pull that out at any time. And I feel like that you're a little bit limited on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, there's a little bit of a limitation. I think understanding that, the student athletes that I coach right now, they're not competing to get scholarship, because we don't do scholarship at the Ivy League level. They're really competing because they love what they do. And so when they share goals with me, and the goal might be, hey, I want to run a sub 51 400 by my senior year. I have to recognize that there's a time limit on that, right? By their senior year. They don't stay over the summer unless it's their choice. So if they're paying to stay in Philadelphia and they want to come to open hours at between 6 o'clock in the morning and 1 p.m. over the summer, then by all means. But, like, I send out programs. They don't have to do them. I would say I'm a little bit limited, but I think that they rise to the occasion. And when they rise to the occasion, it's because they want to. It's not because they have to, or they feel the obligation of scholarship or professional career or anything like that. It's truly because, like, hey, yeah, I want to leave Penn with something, like a piece of me.
And I think that's always such a cool aspect too about the Ivy Leagues is it's a historical school, right? It's something where, like you said, you do want to leave a legacy behind, and that legacy means something.
Mhm.
I remember going to Temple just because it was Temple and it was cool, and
Yeah.
they were doing a big push, so they were trying to get people to not be commuters anymore, and just go into
Right.
school. They
Yeah.
gave a lot of scholarships to dumb people like me, so I got in. And I was like, all right, this is a great spot, right? And then going over to somewhere like UPenn, it was very different. The one thing that I am curious about is you did talk about developing your relationships with administration,
Mhm.
and you are a big networker. What are your plans going forward? Is it, trying to be physically present more with the administration or just check in with them now that you've kind of built those initial relationships?
Yeah, I would say being physically present because at the end of the day, building relationships, period, is very important to me. And it's not conditional on the fact of, hey, they might be able to help me out later. It's truly, I start to think about when I don't feel like coming in to work. Like there are days where I'm like, dang, I am tired. I didn't eat enough yesterday. I didn't sleep enough last night. I just feel like a trash bag right now. There's probably more people that feel the same way, and I want to treat them with the same respect that I would hope that they would give me, right? So, when I don't feel like going in on certain days, um, there was a girl that would always come down and lift at the same time every day. She's in finance, but she did Squattober, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm going for like 350," and I'm like, "Girl, you just work in the finance department," but like she was a great athlete. I think when she played, and she just happens to be super strong, and we bond in that way, and that makes it like, all right, it's worth going to work another day. I get to see her today. We get to live together. We get to do something. I like building those relationships. Period. If we can both help each other out in the future, that's a bonus. But it shouldn't be so hard to show up to work because people you work with might be miserable, right? And what can you do to help them not be miserable? Sometimes it's like people's shtick, like they're just like Squidward, and it's just endearing and loving, and they're just miserable. But when it truly comes down to it, if they don't really feel like coming to work because nobody asks them how their day is, that's kind of crappy, and it's really something fixable.
That's a really interesting aspect too, because again, I feel like you're making me think, and I appreciate that about this podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
You talk. I think a lot of people talk about getting along with other strength coaches, but not necessarily the rest of the staff at a school, right? And those
Hmm.
are some of the most fun relationships because there's no skin in the game for either parties in that
Right,
situation,
right.
right? It's like it doesn't really matter. Like if this guy is over here in player development, I don't even know what that is, right? And he probably doesn't have a clue
Right.
what we do, but he likes to lift, and I see him every once in a while. I think some of the best relationships I've ever had. There was one guy specifically when I was at Tennessee. I didn't remember his name. It was one of those where you introduce
Hmm.
yourselves for the first time, and he definitely forgot my name, and I forgot his because we never once
Yeah.
called each other our names after that, right? But we just even just being in our same space and kind of just cracking a couple jokes with each other, it was a little bit more of a superficial relationship, but it always made my
Hmm.
day when I was lifted next to him because we lifted at the same times, right?
Yeah,
And those
absolutely.
things make a difference. And so I appreciate that you pay attention to the other relationships that matter too, because ultimately it should be fun to come into work every day.
Yeah, I think as strength coaches, one of the thoughts that I kind of had the other day, when we had the clinic, I didn't even say it out loud because again, I think it's a kind of a hot take, but I think that there are a lot of strength coaches that adopt like a very toxic positivity mindset where everything is like, if I know that I'm in, a work environment, and this is something that I worked on at Penn, I'm not afraid to, share that. And we don't have enough strength coaches for the amount of teams and athletes we have. We have 1,000 student athletes. We have 6 strength coaches. One of them has like 2 of them only have 2 sports because they're very, high level, the basketball and football. Um, so really it's like 29 sports between 4 other strength coaches. We're all worked too hard, right? So one of my things was I can't do a 6 a.m. start and go all the way down to 8 p.m., even if I have a big chunk in the middle of the day where I'm free, that everybody ends up putting meetings in. I can't leave work at like 8 or 8:30 and be expected to come back at 6 a.m. Um, that's not sustainable for me. And that's okay if I say that out loud. But there are a lot of people who might say, oh, well, you get to come back. You don't say you have to come back. I don't think that strength coaches realize that outside of the strength conditioning world, that's not normal. That is not a normal way of thinking. There are a lot of things where it's like, yeah, I get to get up on, a Sunday after partying with my friends, and I get to go to my goddaughter's ballet recital at 9 o'clock in the morning. That's different. But when it comes down to, I have a work schedule that's not sustainable for me, but I still have to be grateful for it. There are certain things I can be grateful for, but there are certain things where I can say, hey, well, it's still not sustainable. It's causing me health issues. It's causing me to not enjoy coming to work. Those are things I want to work on so that when it does get to a schedule where I can breathe, then I can say, yes, I get to come into work every day and I get to love what I do. I get to wear sweatpants. I get to coach some really awesome people who happen to also be some of the smartest kids I'll probably ever meet. But it also comes back to, there are some things that do need to change. And there's no positive thinking that'll get around that.
It's so interesting too, because I feel like you're told to never really ask, right? Or you're told, like
Right.
you said, it's this toxic positivity. I like that phrase. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like ultimately it's like, well, it is what it is, right? And like the
Right.
joke I always
Right.
had with our GAs when I started as a young strength coach was like that it's this old vine where it's like, tough times never last, only tough people last. Like we kind of just like make that joke, right?
I
Yeah,
remember
I'm
that
glad you
one.
know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, only tough people's last.
The only tough people's last. And so ultimately we quote that, right? But like, what does that change for us? Like nothing really.
Right.
And so I remember this was like, it happened this past year and I was like scared out of my mind to even bring this up. Right. But ultimately I went into administration. I told them, hey, this is my situation. This is exactly what I need to make this situation better. And I understand if you can't get this done, but I do want you to know I'll have to look for other situations if this can't get done. Right. And then it got done, because ultimately you went up and you asked, right? And you fought for yourself. And so I think that's an interesting piece too, is not only are you supposed to be, this incredibly positive person who just, rolls with things, you're also just supposed to accept it and just say, okay, well, that's the situation. People, maybe I got a 10K bump from the last director who was here, so it's a better situation. When ultimately, like you said, administration does not keep strength and conditioning at the forefront of their mind a lot of the time. It's really just about, can strength coaches, are they happy right now? And then they see us saying, oh, everything's good, and then they're like, okay, then they just kind of compartmentalize and put that aside, where you really have to communicate and you have to show sometimes like, hey, things aren't okay because I want to continue to be a strength coach.
Yeah, it's the good old living the dream response that it started off as a joke and now it's kind of like, oh God, like we're putting off not only to our student athletes, but our families that we're probably neglecting more than we think when we're not there because we have to work all weekend or we have to work odd hours. We're showing them that me just kind of rolling over and, taking the punches from work is more valuable than me fighting for more time with my family. Showing the student athletes that advocating for yourself is very important. And stuff of that nature. I mean, I'm not afraid to, I guess, go up to admin. And when they tell me, hey, there is actually nothing I can do about that right now, I'm okay with it because I went up and I asked. It's the same hand of like, we're afraid to go ask for ourselves, but we also preach closed mouths don't get fed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we not apply those same things to ourselves? We sit around and we complain about salaries, but we're not going up to administration saying, hey, I'm worth more than that.
Yep.
So I think that, and not to say like that's not an easy thing to fix. Getting people to understand us as an industry is not easy, but if there's a day, I mean, I know I wanted to be a mother since I was like 14. My little cousin was born. I was like, wow, raising a kid looks awesome. Not because I think they're cute. I think I could raise a good human being. But knowing that and saying, hey, like, all right, when the day comes, if I get pregnant or, I just feel like leaving because I want to start a family, maybe athletic administration is where I want to go because I want to make sure that people can have an easier time leaving the field or an easier time in the field than I do. And I think that there's a bunch of people that have done a really great job in doing that. And we need more people doing it. Yeah.
Human
Hot
first
take,
admin.
I know.
Yeah, well, it makes a
Yeah.
difference, right? I think it's so interesting. We're interviewing for that new position now, right? And it's like I always tell people, they're like, what do you like about app? And I'm like, well, there's certain athletic departments you like working for, and there's certain athletic departments that you love working for. There's a difference, and I love it here because I was able to have those conversations and get those things done that I needed done for me to be able to enjoy myself, right? And actually just like coming into work, because I think everybody goes through those times. I think the interesting piece too, and like we mentioned earlier, is the collaboration. Is like, can you come in with hardcore data about like, yeah, we're last in the Sun Belt in this, or if you look at my specific salary for basketball strength coaches, we did a big salary pool, right? And it says, okay, where am I at amongst other strength coaches? So when I ask for a raise, I can say, hey, it's not like I'm the highest paid in the Sun Belt. It makes a difference on those specific aspects. So I think that collaboration piece makes it a lot easier to have those conversations with admin too. And then in their minds, I don't know. Sometimes I think admin, like, I think they're great people, right? They're almost like robots. Like you have to like give them a specific input of like, we're, 10th percentile in this. And they're like, oh, okay. Like also, they suddenly open up and they're like, yeah, that makes sense now, instead of just saying it's a problem. Right.
Yeah. Speak their language a little bit.
Yeah. You got to learn how to do that. Well, I thank you. I mean, again, I really appreciate you coming on. It's been really great for me. And that's why I love doing this podcast, right? Because it makes me think, and it makes me think of different avenues. Like you said, just even with interns who don't want to be strength coaches anymore, they probably need some resources on how to figure those things out after that too. So just those little small nuggets, I really appreciate you kind of motivating me on this Monday, right? We're living the dream on a Monday. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited for, continued conversation. I hope more people can have conversations like this.
Absolutely. I think they're critical, and that's what I think we want to do with this actual podcast and this collective, right? If we look at it, is to be able to have these conversations and people listen, and then hopefully get inspired with what they can do at their specific spots. If somebody wanted to reach out, or if somebody wanted to follow you on social media, what would be a good way to do that?
Yeah. So I would say I'm probably more active on Instagram and Twitter/X now, but it's Strength Coach B, and B just for my last name, Bernal. And honestly, if anybody, like, if you look up my UPenn email address on Google, shoot me an email. I'm pretty responsive, I would say, because I really love connecting with people. So
awesome. Well, thank you, Christina. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.